Good morning and welcome. Patriot Radio News Hour. I'm Joe Jaquin, CEO of the Patriot Trading Group, and I hope you had a fantastic weekend, and welcome to Monday. Our toll-free number, 800-951-0592. The website at allamericangold.com. And, man, what a weekend it was. The similarities to the 70s continuing out there. I don't know if you saw any of the press conferences of the new commander-in-chief, Joe Biden. The guy is absolutely clueless, has no idea what's happening around him, and you're seeing all kinds of people starting to question whether or not he's got the chops to be the president. I can tell you right now, he doesn't have it. Doesn't have the mental capacity to be. We all knew it. They all knew it. There's a reason why he's there. It's not by accident, but it's probably one of those reasons why we need to have that financial house in order because this thing's getting a lot worse. You know, think about it. This is the first real test. And I've been waiting for this. You know, he came in to the Goldilocks, right, where the Delta variant wasn't here yet. Obviously, Afghanistan was under control, and we had spent a bunch of money. So the economy was clicking along. And there was, you know, people talking about inflation and worried about those things. And the whole time I've been telling you, this is almost a carbon copy of what we saw in the 70s. Now there's, you know, we talked about the insurrection, right? And the whole who really won the election. Similar, not the same, but similar to Watergate, right? Nixon took us off the gold standard in 1971. Now we have this modern money theory, right? Which, for whatever reason, they've decided, well, it doesn't matter. We can just create trillions out of thin air. What could possibly go wrong, right? Again, not the same, but similar. We have a central bank that is delusioned. You know, and I talk a lot about Arthur Burns. By the way, no central banker wants to mention that guy's name. Very similar to Jay Powell. Not really the strongest. Lived in denial. By the way, something very interesting. Janet Yellen is now saying she supports Jay Powell. Very interesting. Very, very interesting, which just tells me, hey, Jay Powell is going to do what I say. Jay Powell is going to do what I say. We'll see. I think Quarles, the number 2 guy, I think he's gone. That's where they're going to stick Lael Bernard. That's my opinion. We'll see what happens. Weak president. I mean, was there any president, in at least in modern times, that was weaker than Jimmy Carter? Has there been one? You know, I look at the failed extraction in Afghanistan, kind of like the failed extraction of the Iranian hostages under Carter, right? Just complete and utter incompetence on both sides. So, again, similar. There's one other big thing that happened in the 70s that we were kind of missing. The oil crisis. What's our crisis today? We've got a chip crisis, right? All the car, we can't make enough vehicles, we can't make enough phones. I broke my phone. I dropped it a month ago. And I got on, like, my wife, had it in the case for me and everything, but it landed perfectly screen side down on the tile. And my screen cracked, and there was a little black splotch in the corner. And by the time I woke up the next morning, my whole screen was black. And I had a Droid, a Samsung Droid phone. So we went to Verizon and said, hey, I dropped it, blah, blah, blah. I need a new phone. And the guy tells me, well, I'd like to help you. I would. But we don't have any Droid phones. And I look at the wall. There's a whole row of them. I mean, I'm like, they're right here. Matter of fact, you've got a sale sign. It was, It was near Father's Day because they were running a Father's Day sale on the Droid phones. And I looked at the guy. I'm like, really? He goes, yeah. He goes, I can put you on a list. Otherwise, if you need a phone today, the only one I have is an Apple phone. So I ended up, I needed a phone. I had to get the Apple phone. But this chip shortage, is that our oil problem of the 70s? Right? When you think about it, think about it. Toyota came out Friday, hey, we're slashing production 40%. VW, all these other companies, and prices, automobile prices through the roof, laptops, cell phones, all of those things. Kind of, oil used to drive it in the 70s. Now it's all about technology. Man, kind of creepy, isn't it? We'll be back right after the break. 800-951-0592. Gold's up $24, 18.05. Silver's up 60 cents, closing in on 23.70 this morning, and now we got gold back in that range of 1795 to 1830. Remember, they had the big jobs report. That was that big fluff, the fluff jobs report, followed up with the quote-unquote flash crash. Gold's taking it all back. People are starting to really worry, and I think this is a direct reflection of the Biden administration. I mean, this is really what we're seeing now. People are like, wait a minute. This guy he's not all there. Comes out and says, ISIS is in Afghanistan. And then immediately there's the number one terrorist, ISIS terrorist in the world in Afghanistan, right? No, the airport, it's fine. People are getting killed there. Another shootout today. Truly lacking the comprehension of what's happening. And I think a lot of the, I don't know what to call them, Republicans that didn't like Donald Trump because he wasn't a nice guy, starting to regret, right? Because you didn't want to believe. They wouldn't actually run a guy whose faculties are compromised. They wouldn't do that. Yeah, listen, the guy he works till like 3:30, and then he's got to take a nap and get a Jell-O pudding pop. He's been non-existent. He can't even take questions. One thing, whether you like Donald Trump or not, but he loved the questions. Come on, let's go. I'll battle you right now. Joe Biden, you can't even ask him anything because the realities are he doesn't know the answer. And I think what you're seeing today, especially in the dollar kind of falling out of bed today, I think it's a direct reflection of how the rest of the world is starting to perceive what's really happening here. And you start putting, all of these things together. And you see a very similar pattern to what we saw in the 70s. The problem is in the 70s, the debt wasn't that big. I mean, think about what they had to do to quell inflation. I mean, a mortgage, a car loan was 20+%. Now, the interest on the debt, 20% of, less than $1 trillion. It's still a lot, but it's manageable, at least for a little while. Now, what do we have, 40 trillion? We don't even know, right? Debt clock stopped right now. We don't know. We're waiting for debt limits and all this other stuff. You don't think it's bad? How about this one? We got existing home sales today. That number came out. Now, that's the big number. Right? The vast majority of home sales in the country are existing home sales. To give you perspective, the annualized rate is below 6 million, which is very similar to what we would do in the 90s. So if you just looked at volume, you'd be like, housing's probably pretty flat. Just looking at volume. You may even say, well, man, I don't know, housing could be losing value because volume, usually when do you have accelerating prices? Well, when you got a lot of volume. We don't. Now, here was what was interesting. They say that existing home sales is up 1% from a year ago. So we've kind of hit the peak here. The inventory is getting better, right? So there's some more homes on the market. Almost all of the growth in sales, according to the report, is occurring at the upper end markets, while the mid to lower tier aren't seeing growth because there are still too few starter homes available. Now, we've heard this. Oh, there's just not enough starter homes. That's not true. And what I mean by that is a starter home. 3-bedroom, 2-bath, 1,500 to 1,800 square feet. Runs about $400,000 to $500,000. That's the problem. Let me break it down for you. The buying is all in the high end. Existing homes sold for sub $250,000 fell 30% year on year. Home sales over $1 million up 60% year on year. These are the numbers. And again, they're trying to convince you that there's not inflation. Well, that it's only temporary. Very similar to what Arthur Burns was saying in the 70s. Oh, well, oil. Oil drove everything up. Right? Joe Biden. I've called OPEC to say, please pump more oil because gas prices are too high. Right? Chip shortages. That's the problem with cars. Oh, used cars and new cars, they're so expensive because there's not enough chips. Housing, well, they're so expensive because lumber prices shot up. Of course, lumber prices, they're back to, reason. I mean, still twice as much as they used to be. All of these reasons that really aren't true. Yes, is there chip shortages in automobiles? Yes, there is. But guess what? Every other component in that car has gotten more expensive. From the 4 tires to the aluminum to the steel to the wiring of the cars, the copper wiring in the cars, the seats, right? The dash, not just the chips, the labor to make them. And they all want to sit there and tell you that, oh, well, no, it was just this little problem or that little problem. Or I love this one. Oh, well, we've got a bottleneck problem right now. It's a transportation problem. And we're sitting here and we're watching all of these prices continue to rise. And yet the economy's slowing down. How about today? The other piece of data out today, the Purchasing Managers Index fell again. So did the Servicing Manager. Matter of fact, services fell a lot, almost 10%. And they said that this is the lowest PMI, this is Purchasing Managers Indexes, since December of 2020. And again, what are they saying inside of it? Well, they say not only are there delays in the supply chain, the survey saw increasing frustrations in what they have to pay people. They said job growth in the PMI survey was the lowest since July of last year. That doesn't sound all of that problem. Now remember, I told you we had that fluffy jobs report. This next month's going to be a lot lower. Now I don't know if J.P. Morgan's right and it's only going to be 50,000, but it's going to be a lot lower. Of course, what else did they complain about? Prices charged for goods and services grew at a much increased rate, even as demand was starting to slow. Prices continued to rise sharply due to what they said were persistent upward pressures on cost. And they blamed it on a shortages of material, a shortage of labor. Demand is cooling due to the rising case numbers, right? Okay, well, the Delta variant. And inflationary pressure. So this was inside of the survey. This is part of, gold was up about 10, 12 bucks until these two numbers hit. Right now, gold's up $24. And it's important to understand why. And the answer is very, very simple. Number one, instead of going off the gold standard, modern money theory was just that, a theory and a bad one. You can't take the money supply. Forget about the debt. Okay? Just set that aside. You can't increase the money supply almost 500% and expect no consequences from it. That's only somebody that's just idiotic thing. That's Joe Biden mental capacity thinking. But that's what the central bank did. They don't want to tell you about it. And they'll say, well, it's not that bad because, we put a lot of it on our balance sheet. So, see, it's okay. Exactly what happened in the 70s. Right? This was the Lyndon Johnson came in, passed all this stuff and food stamps and this and that, and we spent all of this money during the Nixon and Ford up through Jimmy Carter administration. We saw wages rise at the fastest pace, in modern history in the 70s. Did you see the article this week? The low end, the fast food worker, right? The one that, would you like to supersize that? Would you like fries with that combo meal? Their wages rose 4% in the first quarter, 10% in the second quarter. We don't know what it is in the third quarter, but this is the largest wage growth ever. And usually, when do we see wage growth in this category? It's only when the federal government raised minimum wage. And this is why I keep trying to explain it to you. This isn't transitory. This is permanent. This isn't a supply chain problem. This isn't a computer chip problem or a lumber problem. This was a problem with a bunch of guys trying to save their precious little system that they put the worst tax of all upon all of us. 800-951-0592. I find it very interesting. The fake jobs number. And I don't know that was fake, just a lot of fluff. The flash crash. Gold and silver fall. Demand goes through the roof. And now all of a sudden, here we go with the big rise in price again. Type 2 silver eagles, no word. Call back tomorrow. Not a great sign. We'll keep you posted there. $20 gold. Listen, I've got them at $2,095, and really they should be $23.15. But I'm trying to I'm keeping the margin tight here, trying to give you an opportunity. I do have a good amount of $20 gold. 1975, or I'm sorry, 2075. 2075. I wish it was 1975. 2075, which again, we've been here before. This is a good entry point here because here's what's happening. All the things that they were hoping for and wishing for, even though they didn't really make any sense, it's not happening. And we've got a compromised president. We've got a compromised head of the Federal Reserve. Just that simple. 800-951-0592. So we talked about existing homes. Sub 250,000. Down 30%. Why? Because you can't build a house for $250,000. Can't do it. Can't be done. You all know it. All of us know it. Right? Now maybe in some part of Oklahoma or Nebraska somewhere, maybe you can get one. Here in Phoenix, that's a dilapidated shack. In California, a shack, literally a shack is like $1 million. Home sales over $1 million, up 60%. Think about who can afford that, honestly. That means you're putting at least $200,000 down. You're going to own nothing. Rents. Let's talk rents. Because the only reason why the Federal Reserve's inflation gauge is only at 5.5% is because of how they calculate what it costs to live in America. And they lie with some rent equivalent. So I just gave you home prices, okay? We know, record highs. Rent. In the second quarter of 2021, occupied rental apartments jumped by a million. That is the biggest annual increase since they started tracking that number in 1993. So record demand for apartments, obviously because they can't afford a home. But it gets worse. Occupancy rates last month, 96.9%. Also a record. Rents on newly signed leases surged 17% in July when compared to what the prior tenant paid. I'm going to read it again, Jay Powell. Are you listening, Janet Yellen? When compared to what the prior tenant paid, rents rose 17%. Now, why is this important? Because, just so you know, the biggest single component in the CPI, that's the inflation index used by the central bank, is this rent equivalent, as they like to call it. See, because they're so stinking smart, they're so smart that they came up with some BS formula that nobody really knows, doesn't track anything. Do you know in their CPI, they said this rent equivalent number was up 2.4%. Here's the best case scenario. We already know home prices are up 23%. That's the number. Rents paid above what the prior tenant was paying, up 17%. So, best case scenario, Jay Powell, is the biggest portion of the CPI is up at least 17%. So when we really look at where we really truly sit, what is the real rate of inflation? Well, we know last week we got a report from businesses that said we haven't seen inflation like this since 1974. Need I remind you, gold went from $35 to $800 during that 10-year period when Nixon took us off the gold standard. We had an oil crisis. We had chaos in the presidency, and then ultimately a very, very weak president with a very, very weak central banker. And now we've got the 2021 version of it. It's like the 70s all over again. But instead of a oil crisis, we have a supply crisis. Right? We have a supply crisis. We have controversy in the presidency. We have a weak president and a weak central banker. And now it's affecting the dollar. Where's gold headed? Where's silver headed? I've got a pretty good idea it's going to be a lot higher than it is today. Patriot Radio News Hour. We'll be back right after the break. 800-951-0592. The Dow's up 275 points as Pfizer receives FDA's full approval. Get ready, more mandates coming. Gold's up 24, 1805 in rising. Silver just under 60 cents, just below $23 U.S. $20 gold pieces, $2,075 today at 800-951-0592. Indians, we've been talking a lot about them, out of sight right now. $10 Indians above 1,200. $5 Indians, 700. I don't have any. I mean, I can get Indians. They're going to be more than that because I got to go up in grades. We'll keep watching that Indian market. When I've got them at the lower end, scoop them up, because when the run comes in, we'll switch them. Double your gold. That's the way we like to do it here. But right now, $20 gold pieces, listen, the math is easy. I know we want to pretend. I sit here, and I tell you, by the way, I want you to know who did the research I just gave you about rentals. That was Bloomberg. How is the Fed saying that one of the slowest growths in inflation is rent equivalent? You're just being lied to. And he knows he's a liar. And he's got a mainstream media that is willing to lie with him. And the reason is because they want to protect their precious little system. Here's the point. They should have been fighting inflation last year. In the last quarter, especially when they were handing out all the stimulus checks. Instead, what have they done? They've ignored it. And we learned from the 70s, when you ignore it, it doesn't get better. It only gets worse. And the only way to fight it is to shrink the money supply. How do you do that? Well, you raise interest rates really, really, really high. What do you think is going to happen? I'm asking you. As I sit here, and today, not one phone line has lit up yet. Really? You don't think you need to get prepared? But you think this is all going to work? What, Joe Biden's going to wake up tomorrow and find mental capacity he doesn't have? I saw over the weekend the betting line on Biden making it out of this term are below 50% now. Which should really scare you, because Kamala Harris has proved one thing. She may have all of her faculties, but she's just as incompetent as he is. And guess what? The House is getting ready to come back. Nancy and the gang trying to get all of this spending crammed down our throats. We know we're going to get the $1.2 trillion infrastructure. That's a given. How much of this $3.5 trillion human infrastructure garbage are we going to get? That's really the only question left. And it doesn't matter. They're going to spend it. Is it going to be $2 trillion, $2.5 trillion, $3 trillion? They're not going to fight it until it collapses. This isn't transitory. I hope I proved it to you today. Rents signed up 17% from the prior tenant. That shattered every record. Well, forever. But we've never seen this type of inflation before. And really, when you think about it, it makes sense. Because all the numbers are so much bigger. Can't buy a house for $250,000. Can't do it. And of course, all of those homes are being bought up by BlackRock. All the sales growth up 60% year over year. The sales of $1 million homes. What does that really mean? Oh, look how much money. No. It just means no one's buying homes. And that's what the data says. We can't even sell 6 million homes in a year. That's nothing. We have 330 million people, not counting illegals. 800-951-0592. Stay diversified. Okay. But make sure your wealth is protected. Because here's the thing, we don't know when, what's going to be the catalyst. Here's what we do know. Our central bank has been working furiously on this digital currency. We'll touch upon that next. Final segment coming up. 800-951-0592. The digital currency is going to be the new going off the gold standard. Remember back in 33, of course, most of us weren't alive. But they closed all the banks, took all the gold away, and said that American citizens could only use paper money. Of course, and then they devalued the paper money by 70%. Price of gold went from 20 to 35. And now we sit here with the worst inflation. I think this is the worst inflation we've ever seen, to put it mildly. Ask anybody who's got kids in their 20s and 30s. Ask them. They'll tell you. Kids can't buy houses. One of the most vocal critics on the Fed, and I shouldn't say critics, there's one guy who's been saying, hey, we need to fight inflation, a guy named Robert Kaplan. He's the Dallas Fed chair. Not a very powerful member, but he at least says, hey, you know, this is kind of idiotic. Now, problem is, he voted for all this crap, so don't mistake it. He was out on Friday on some Zoom call. And he said that the U.S. Central Bank will eventually issue its own digital currency, calling it the last mile in a train that is the digitalization of the payment system. I imagine in the years ahead, it's something the Fed is actively working on now. And I can see reasons why that it will eventually get developed. China is already doing it. Talking about digital money. And here's the long and the short of it. They're not being honest. They already know we're going to a digital currency. But it's not just about, it's just collecting pay. We collect payments now. Visa, MasterCard, the banks. They already know. The collapse is coming. And just like in 33, they closed the banks. Half of them never reopened again. Well, look at today. We hardly got any banks left. And outside the top 10 banks or so, That's where all the money is anyway. A lot of these banks are going away. We'll be down to just a handful after this digital money comes. Mark my words. And there's going to be another major devaluation. 70% may not be enough because the numbers are so much bigger. But again, this is how they do it. Oh, we're not doing anything. No, of course not. We wouldn't do that. Well, we're looking into it, but, we're just kicking the tires. Oh, well, we're actively working on it. 800-951-0592. $20 gold, $2,075. God bless everybody. I'll be back tomorrow.